We've got an interesting drive today. It's from Land Rover, the Range Rover Evoque. Now, we last tested this 3 years ago. That was in 2019 when it was brand new for 2020. This is the second gen Evoque. It's basically the same as it was for 2022, which means you get those famous words emblazoned on the hood. It is the smallest and most affordable way to spell Range Rover. Subcompact SUVs are very easy to park and very hard to justify buying brand new. Space and amenities come at a premium. If you're going luxury like this car, you better have money. So let's see what this base Evoque can do with a few options at 55 grand. The Evoque is one of the sharpest looking SUVs that Land Rover makes, and it's one of the least popular models Land Rover sells. In America, in 2021, it was second to last. You'd think the Evoque would be a bestseller since it starts at $45,000, right? Automakers sell more copies of their smaller, cheaper cars than their larger, expensive cars, but not Land Rover. The Range Rover Sport starts at 71 grand, and it outsells the Evoque by 3 to 1. What about the full-size Range Rover that Queen Elizabeth drives herself and costs deep into the 100s? Still beats the Evoque at more than 2 to 1. It's not baffling. Range Rover customers are willing to pay because the brand has a lot of cachet, right? They'll pay almost anything. And in this car, well, you don't get a whole lot of car. It's more than a foot shorter than a Honda Civic. This is like a standard room at the Plaza Hotel in New York. You're paying a lot for not a lot of space, but you are getting the amenities, particularly the style. Even in this boring gray, it's flat. I wouldn't recommend it, but this car still looks hot. It looked hot, what was it, 10 years ago this car came out when I first drove it. Now it's no longer available as a convertible or a two-door, but the Evoque has aged really well. It's one of those really striking designs. You know this is a Range Rover even if it's the smallest one. The front got the really thin lights, got these oversized 20-inch wheels on here, big bulging fenders. I love these retractable door handles. Those look fantastic, especially the way the roof goes all the way down and the way the shoulder line comes down toward the front. They're kind of moving like this, so it gives this kind of like a bulldog kind of racer stance. You know it's a truck-like profile, but it never feels like it entirely. This is the R Dynamic trim, which adds bronze accents all over, and it has a new front bumper. From the front to the side to the back, you'll always recognize an Evoque. Maybe the back looks even nicer. It's just sharp, especially these taillights. They have this mirror-like effect, which adds a lot of depth. And these retractable door handles, they pop out when you unlock it and they're flush to the body when it's locked. Really nice. You don't get a lot of utility though. It's 8.3 inches of total clearance. That's less than most Subarus. And you don't get a ton of cargo space either. It's a nice little hatch. It's finally powered as standard for 2022. The cargo space, average for the subcompact class, 21 cubic feet behind the seats and 50 when they're folded. There's more standard features for 2022. Heated front seats, proximity key, that's nice, and a wireless device charger behind this dash. But the Evoque has only gotten pricier over the years, and I've had some new loaner Evoques from my Land Rover dealer that felt a lot more well-equipped for the money. This one's pretty base. The steering column is manual. Forget any seat memory. There's ambient darkness, not lighting. A single camera, not 360. And forget about semi-automated driving. This Evoque doesn't have adaptive cruise that's standard on cars costing 25 grand. This one is almost 55. On our 2020 Evoque, that car cost a few thousand more than this one, but looked a whole lot prettier inside. The materials are generally good. This is not the full leather interior, so you don't have any more leather on the dash or the doors. That's a bit rougher, but overall the fit and finish is high quality. The Evoque has two different dashboard designs depending on how much money you spend. It's not obvious at first, since when the car is off, it's all dark and really slick. Then when you turn the car on, well, there's no bright screen below here. It's all just touch-sensitive buttons that seem to be scattered all over the place. Seems a bit like wasted space, but there is a heated windshield. That's something you won't find on most any new car. And these dials are multifunction. You got the air temperature here. Press it for seat heating or cooling if that's equipped. And you some more hidden features. Check that out. Little rings for the fan and the driving modes. I was having trouble finding the driving modes. They're right here. They're hidden until they're lit. So it's kind of a neat design, a little complex to use, but the functionality is there. I like the way this aluminum trim looks surrounding the gear selector, but it also seems like they could have used this for more buttons, say some seek buttons for the radio or maybe the auto hold feature for the brakes. They're both accessible only from the touchscreen. And this main screen, It has a bezel around it where on the loaded Evoques, you actually get a screen that's flush with the dash and it looks even nicer. Let me get to the good part. Land Rover has software that works. For the first time in 14 years that I've been driving these vehicles, it actually doesn't break. Pivi Pro is what Jaguar Land Rover calls its newest infotainment system, and it actually is fast, it's easy to use, and most everything seems to work and fits in the proper place. I like all these graphics, they're sharp. You can choose to have apps as tiled things right here, or you can actually press and hold, move things around. It's more customizable than it ever was. And there's some neat little apps on here. Slope Assist will show you the degrees that you're traveling up and down, how the axles look. That's kind of fun. You also have energy impact, where you can actually see how the heated windshield and other accessories are drawing from the battery and from your fuel efficiency. It'll rate your driving style and even give you suggestions, kind of like a teacher. I don't really like being told what to do though, so I would fail that part of the test here. But the nav has some really great features now, especially the POIs. It's super easy to just search. The 4G internet is fast, and boom, here you go. The internet's just great on this car. And if you don't want to use the factory nav, Apple CarPlay is wireless. It's standard, so is wireless Android Auto. On the base Evoques like this, there's analog gauges, but they're cut and kind of sliced by this central display. That's all right, because you still get a lot of functionality here. I can see driver assistance, I can see my speedometer, everything up from a glance. It's a little confusing at first, but it's easy to use with this D-pad once you get used to it. I still think though that the full digital display is worth the extra upgrade. The rear seat is for short trips only. There's not a lot of space. It's pretty tight back here. This is where my seat was when I was sitting here. I'm 5'11", and I don't really want to sit back here for too long. And the visibility is also poor, but you knew that because this car looks so darn good on the outside. As the baby in the Range Rover family, the Evoque is not going to go off-road like all the other larger Rovers can. There's no low-range transfer case, there's not as many drive modes, there's no air suspension that lifts it, so you're limited. And that's the whole point of this car. It's a street Rover. But there are some nice things that you can use in the driving mode for traction control, specifically low traction launch, which I will try now since I'm on some snow. That's interesting. So it really dulls the throttle response until you get up to about 19 miles an hour. And that's good. Okay, now it's disabled. You can do that yourself. These aids are here on the software. There are 5 different driving modes on the terrain response system, plus an auto mode that will figure it out for you. That I like, and it does change the throttle sensitivity, the gear shift mapping, a bunch of other points. It obviously doesn't have a low range transfer case. To be honest, if you don't have a set of winter tires here in the snow, you're not gonna get very far in the Evoque. Now the road is clear. I'm in the default comfort mode. This is where the Evoque really wants to hang out. Not on the trails, not on the little cactus icon that you'll see on here. Forget about that stuff. You're driving in the city, on the highway. That's what this thing is for. And it actually handles really well. I mean, that's the biggest selling point, I think, of this car, that Land Rover doesn't even really sell that hard. You drive this, and the steering's really good, the chassis is really buttoned down. You don't get that in other Land Rovers or Range Rovers, except maybe the Range Rover Velar. That's it. So as a driving SUV, yeah, this one's pretty good. What I like about this Evoque is that it doesn't have adaptive dampers, there's no air suspension, and Land Rover has tuned the chassis really well as it is. That's not easy to do. You can mess it up in so many ways, and they've nailed this down. I thought the first Evoque was pretty good. This one is just as good, if not a little better. It's actually riding more comfortably than before. The maneuverability is really good. I think that's why you buy this over the larger cars, even if they're the same price. They're easier to park, easier to steer. Brakes are good too. It's a 2-liter turbo 4. Yeah, the specs are okay. 246 horsepower, 269 pound-feet. But the transmission is still bad, and this is not Land Rover's fault. This is a ZF unit that I've hated ever since I drove it, I think it was 2014, when it came out in the Jeep Cherokee. It's not even just a question of software tuning, I think it's hardware. You'll find that it just does not respond that well, especially mid-range acceleration. It'll hesitate. If you're using the paddle shifters, there's a shift from 5 to 4th gear that just always feels like there's a gap before it actually engages the gear. So if you're trying to use paddle shifters, if you're trying to drive in a sporting manner, you're gonna be disappointed with this. But if you're just gonna not touch this, keep it in automatic, you're gonna like it. because at just normal speeds cruising around, the Evoque is actually a pleasant car to drive. It's just not as sporty as it might appear from the outside. Even though this is called R-Dynamic, there's not much dynamic about it except the handling. So I'll say it again, handling and steering, great. Performance and acceleration, not so great. So there is another 4-cylinder engine option if you choose the HST. That's a new trim that actually combines a 48-volt hybrid system. It takes some load, essentially the air conditioning and other accessories, off of the engine. It's supposed to save fuel, but more importantly, it delivers more power. 296 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. Does it get better fuel economy? Barely. This one is 20 city, 27 highway, and 22 combined. The hybrid version gets like 1 mpg more combined. So really doesn't actually do much, but it does deliver more power. For that, I would rather be in that one than this one. For the price of a well-optioned Evoque, you're almost at a Velar. And that car, well, it's a lot nicer inside and more substantial outside. That's the problem with the Evoque. It has to be about 60 to 64 grand loaded to feel really nice. And at that price, you could be in a Defender. That's what people are buying instead. I think the whole class of subcompact luxury SUVs is overpriced. BMW, Mercedes, Lexus, Jaguar, everything. The Evoque is not where I'd park my money. I'd rather get a larger luxury sedan like a Jaguar XF. So if you really are set on a very small luxury SUV, just be sure you're ordering enough options so it's just as nice inside as it looks outside. For more details, check out CarGurus.com, subscribe, tons of vehicles. It's gonna be warm soon, thank goodness, so stay with us. We'll see you next time.